just going to run through how you work out which rule it is, and then how you know whether to multiply or divide. So sine is opposite on hypotenuse, cos is adjacent on hypotenuse, and tan is opposite on adjacent. So it's SOH, CAH, TOA. Now, basically, X will either end up being on the top or it'll end up being on the bottom. So if we look at these two different questions here, we're just going to show you how to figure out which one's which. So if that's 9 meters 40 degrees, and that's X 7 meters and 48 degrees. Okay, so if you look at the first one here, we're given the 9, and the 9 is adjacent, and then we are given the X, and the X is on the hypotenuse. So first of all, when you're working out which rule, we know that this here is opposite, that's adjacent, that's the hypotenuse, so it's AH or cos. Now, the one that comes first is the adjacent. If X is the adjacent, then X would be on top, but X isn't. X is on the hypotenuse. And if you look at the formula, the hypotenuse is on the bottom. So when you go to set this up, you go, all right, cos of the angle equals the adjacent. Now the adjacent is 9. It comes first on the hypotenuse, which is X. So it's A on H. So because the adjacent is the first side and the hypotenuse is the second, then X turns out to be on the bottom. And when X is on the bottom, you divide. So you write the number first and then you divide by cos 40. You're also able to write it as a fraction. Just be wary that when you put in your calculator, the bracket button will open and you need to close the other bracket button, because sometimes that's the reason that you'll get an error, because the bracket button hasn't been closed, even though you didn't open it, but your calculator has opened it for you. So you get 11.7 meters. Okay, if we look at the other one, all right, so we have what? Opposite. So the opposite this time is the X, and the adjacent is adjacent is number 7. So if we look at this, the one that came first there was the opposite. So it's opposite on the adjacent. So it's going to be X on 7. So you can see X turns out to be on top. So setting up, tan of 48 degrees equals opposite, because that's the first one, which would be X, on the adjacent, which is 7. You notice that X is on the top, so it'll be 7 times tan 48. And then you just have to work that out, 7 times tan 48, and you end up with 7.7 meters. So when you're thinking about this, basically, when you're trying to work out which one comes first, which one has X on the top. First of all, if X is on top, then you times by the sine, cos, or the tan of whatever the angle is. And if X is on the bottom, then you divide by sine, cos, or tan. You can kind of think about it as like, if you've got like tan 30 equals 7 over X, see how it says divided by there? So it's going to be 7 divided by, and that's divided by, and then tan 30. Whereas if you have tan 30 and it was equal to X on 7, then that 7 will come up there in times. So X is just 7 times tan 30. So if the X is on the top, you times, and if the X is on the bottom, you will divide. And you always write, when you're setting it up, like when you're doing the calculation, you set it up, it's the first step, but then you always write the number, and then you go either times sine, cos, or tan, or divided by sine, cos, or tan, just depending on whether X is on the top or X is on the bottom.